it is. This is special board meeting of June 26, 2025. It is now 18:09. We'll begin roll call. Mary, please. 6:10, 6:09. I say 16, I have 18.
President Doe is absent with an excuse absence from the June 17th board meeting. Vice President Lay,
Here.
Clerk Chavez,
Here.
Member Herrera,
Here.
Member Cortese.
Here.
All right. We have agenda for item 1.03. Want to welcome to the special board meeting of June 26, 2025. Are there any member of the public who would like to provide public comment to the board on a closed session agenda item at this time?
We have none.
No member? Yeah, see none? Respond none? Oh, did I miss the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot the Pledge of Allegiance. No, so we can skip that. Okay, so now we're gonna recess for the closed session.
People have had the opportunity to create and submit maps. And so tonight we'll be going through kind of review what makes a map, what's the rules to this process, what makes a map valid, or so to speak. What is the public? This is an opportunity for the public and the board to go, okay, this is what we like about these maps. These are the questions we have. Hold on a minute. That's what tonight is for us to make sure that the maps are seen. To get input on them, and then also to remind everyone of the process. Monday again, if you want to learn to draw a map, we'll see you at Independence. And then there'll be a fourth public hearing after further maps are made and more input is taken. And then in the fall, we'll have the fifth meeting when the decision is actually made. So for tonight, please know this is not the end of the process. We're like in the middle of it. The maps are out. I think that sparked some interest in folk, right? Which is great. And so we're here to listen, learn, and also for you to get your questions answered about how this all works. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our contracted demographer with Redistricting Partners, Paul Mitchell.
Good evening, and thanks for having me. My name is Paul Mitchell. I'm the owner of Redistricting Partners, and while I wait for the presentation to come up, I'll just give a little bit of my background. I've worked for over 20 years in demography, redistricting, Voting Rights Act issues. I worked for the County of Santa Clara, the City of San Jose, Evergreen Community College District. So I did all of their redistrictings. I did the initial districts for Evergreen when they converted 2 districts, kind of like the process you're going through here. I have done redistrictings and CVRA conversions for over 100 cities, school boards, and counties in the state of California. I'm also the demographer for the state of New York and the city of New York for their redistricting commissions. And so this is something that I have worked hard on for a long time, and I'm really happy to be here to talk through it and hopefully do a couple different things here. One is help folks understand more about the districting process and the things that go into it, and then also help the community and the board be active participants in this process. This is very different than when I first started working in redistricting, when a redistricting process would be the board going behind closed doors, drawing maps on a napkin, and then passing them. This process has been put out in the public space. There's a process that I'll go over with required hearings and public engagement, and it makes for a much better final product, I'll tell you that. I'm going to go over in this presentation the California Voting Rights Act, the Fair Maps Act, these 2 pieces of state law, which are relatively new, work in concert with each other to create our process. I'm going to talk about communities of interest, which has been a focus of our prior hearings and the public workshops. I'm going to go over the public submissions. These are maps that were drawn by members of the public in a public mapping tool called Districter. I'm going to go over draft maps that we created based on public submissions. So what we did was we took the public submissions, we considered which ones could be viable final plans, and we drafted them as draft plans A, B, and C for the board to consider, and for these to be, either, moved forward and continued as maps that they want to consider, or shot down, or whatever we want to do in this process. I'm going to go over at the end kind of the remaining public hearing schedule and talk a little bit about what's next. So the California Voting Rights Act is a law that's been around for over 20 years, 30 years maybe. But it took a long time for it to really start getting enforced. And it took a long time for certain agencies to actually be put in a position where they were having to convert to districted election systems. The law says that you can't have an at-large election system, the kind of election where you elect 3 board members one cycle and 2 board members the next, and everybody in the entire district votes. You can't have that type of election system if there is racially polarized voting. And in the claim made by Mr. Shankman, an attorney who sent in a letter to the district that's on the website, the actual letter, he claims there's racially polarized voting. And from our experience, the State Redistricting Commission identified racially polarized voting in this area. The City Council redistricting that I did identified racially polarized voting in this area. The county supervisors redistricting, which we worked on with the commission, also identified racially polarized voting in this area. So it's not really something that we need to get into a long discussion about, but it probably is the right precondition for a CVRA claim. When we do the districting process, we have to follow the Fair Maps Act, which is a law that was passed by current Attorney General Bonta, and it created a number of requirements, both in process and criteria, that trickle down kind of from what the State Redistricting Commission has to do and impose that on local governments. Some of these are criteria.
May I didn't realize you're going to move so quickly from where you were speaking, and I wanted to interject a comment if I can.
Okay.
And that is the stipulation of racially polarized voting. I just feel compelled to say it every time that's said, that I do not believe, well, first let me say, I believe it is time for district elections. I do not believe that this district exhibits racially polarized voting. And you can just look at this composition of the board of 3 women, 2 men, 2 Vietnamese, 2 Latinos, 1 white European. I don't know how more almost perfect you can get in the representation on this board of this community. And it irks me a little bit to keep hearing this repeated at every meeting, that the reason why we're doing this is because of racially polarized voting. So I just want to put that statement out there. And I believe we ought to move to district elections. So thank you.
Yeah. And if asked, I'm happy to dive in more in this, but I'm happy also just to kind of move on. Okay. So the criteria starts with some criteria that are actually not just state law, but federal law. The first one is that districts have to be equally sized. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to have equally sized be a 10% buffer essentially from the largest district to the smallest district. So it's not like congressional districts where they're supposed to be, the congressional districts in California are equally sized to 1 person. We're not going to do that. But we're going to try to keep districts that are relatively equally sized. And that's the idea that everybody should have equal share of representation and political power in voting for board members. And if one district was really huge and another district really small, the huge district's voting power would be weakened relative to the really small district where they'd have fewer people voting and each vote would essentially count for more. So we want districts that are relatively equal size. There's a law that they have to be contiguous, meaning whole pieces. You can't have districts. We've literally seen these in California where a northern part of a city is in one district and then someplace down in the southern part is in another district. Makes no sense. So they have to be contiguous. There's technical things on that too. We need to maintain communities of interest. And this is the most subjective part of the process. A community of interest, and let me see if I'll go into this in more detail in future slides, but a community of interest is something that meets kind of 3 criteria. This isn't written out in the law, but this is kind of how it works in practice. The first criteria is for a community interest to be something that you're considering for a districting process, you have to be able to kind of name it. You have to be able to say what it is. You say the community of interest is the skateboarder community or the cyclist community. Let's say that. This community of interest is the cyclist community. And the second thing is that you have to be able to draw it. So where does the cyclist community reside? I'm going to say, just for the joke of it, that it's at the Heiler Velodrome down the street here. Okay, so you've got a thing you can name, and you've got a place where it is that you can actually draw. The third thing is that they have something to do with the actions of the board that's being districted. So I don't think the school board has anything to do with the velodrome, but the county might. So in the county, it might be a relevant community of interest, but in the school board, it isn't. The campuses, where the campuses are, those can be a community of interest. For your districting, they might be, but in a water board redistricting, they never say, show me where the high school is, right? So a community of interest can be different for different agencies that are being districted, and I'll go into that in more detail. Districts should be easily understandable and identifiable and follow natural boundaries. So oftentimes when you're drawing districts, you want to follow major streets. You don't want to cross one side to the other of a freeway for no reason. You don't want to like go one side or the other of a big river for no reason. You want to make it kind of follow things that people can see and understand. One of the goals is at the end of the process, somebody who's a voter looks at their district and goes, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can understand that. That you don't have a map that looks like, 5 octopuses hugging. It's supposed to be something that makes sense for people.
Going back to communities of interest real quick, you said that our school sites could be community of interest.
Uh-huh.
And yet earlier in this process, I heard that the maps do not have to align with our attendance boundary.
Exactly, yeah.
So how do you reconcile those two things?
They definitely don't have to align to anything. They don't have to align to any particular community of interest. An attendance boundary, and I'll get into it in more detail, could be useful in 2 criteria. One is it could be a community of interest. There might be an area that sees themselves as a community of interest and it is well defined by that attendance zone. And so you say, that's great, it's community of interest. It also could add to the easily understood. Because like I know where my kid goes to high school and I know where my friends' kids go to, which high school they go to. And so it does kind of make sense from an easily understood. Those can be great criteria. We might find, and I'll go into the presentation about maps that were drawn by attendance zones, that they don't meet other criteria, but it is an absolutely legitimate criteria. Communities of interest have to be weighed. If somebody comes forward and says, we're a community that is focused on the technology, high schools, and the technology that's going on in our schools because of our current workforce that we have, and this is our community of interest, and somebody else comes forward in a redistricting in Riverside, they came forward and they were all farmers, and they said, we have specific programs that do stuff for, like, teach animal husbandry in high school, and they wanted to make sure that the district that they got represented their community of interest. Those are all legitimate, but you don't just say, grab the first community of interest and it trumps everything else. It's just a part of the process. The final is that districts stay compact. A lot of people focus on this visually because they see a redistricting in North Carolina and they say that can't be, that has to be a gerrymander because the districts don't make sense. So a lot of people want to keep districts that are compact. In California law, there's a technical definition of it. We don't need to get into it in much detail, but it is one of the lower criteria in the process. If we get to the place where we're debating, do we keep this community of interest together or do we keep a district more compact? Usually we would keep the community of interest together over simply compactness is one of the criteria. It's a lower rank criteria. So communities of interest, and I talked about this already a little bit, they should include things that speak to the nature of the residents in an area, that are maybe unique to that area and different than other areas. And the idea is that we want these communities that have issues before the board to feel as though they have a stronger voting power after this process. And also they have a stronger representation power, meaning that they know who their member of the board is, and they feel like they can approach them, and they feel like they have kind of a unified voice in that district. They don't have, an issue and all of their members of their community are split between 3 different districts for no reason. They want to be kind of kept in one district so they can have stronger power. There are things that community of interest cannot include. If somebody comes up to the microphone and says, I want to run for the Board of Trustees and my community of interest is my house, and so I want my house drawn in this district, that's not a community of interest, nor are the addresses of any of the current board members communities of interest. I don't know anybody's address. I won't throughout the process. And political party affiliation is not a community of interest. Somebody came up here and said, I'm a libertarian, and all of us libertarians, we live in this one neighborhood. That's great, good for you, but it's not a community of interest. The attendance zones is a community of interest is one of the first things that kind of came up in this process. And attendance zones are interesting because they're drawn for the purposes of, identifying which kids will be going to which schools and so on. And oftentimes they can represent communities in of themselves. Another community of interest would be the ethnic communities within the district. And the prominent ethnic communities within the district are the Asian community and the Latino community. And so we mapped these with little heat maps, and I'll show these a little bit to kind of give a better understanding. The Latino community, as you can see, is strongest in kind of the center of the district, with another portion on the southeastern area. And as you see the draft maps, you'll see those areas kind of being drawn into more Latino districts. The Asian population has kind of a northern and a central southern portion that are the strongest concentrations. And what's interesting about the Asian population, even though in the Federal Voting Rights Act, we'll talk about Asian as a single group, that's just how the data works, that's how the law works. There is within that differences in the Asian nationalities, with 60% of the Asian population in the district being Vietnamese, 15% Filipino, 14% Chinese, and 1% other. So that's data from registered voters, so it's a little bit different data set, but we can't get the data from the census with those nationality breakdowns at this kind of granularity. When we look at the neighborhoods, I took the San Jose neighborhoods, there's like 200 neighborhoods in San Jose, and I overlaid it to the district boundaries and then created these slides that are accessible at the link there. And in here you can see a breakdown of a neighborhood and the striking density of the ethnic population. So this area, I can't see it from here, but I think it's like 74% Latino in this Tropicana and Lanai neighborhood, it's a heavily Latino area, but also it has historic roots in the Latino community. I remember from, I think it was the city redistricting, that somebody said Cesar Chavez's family lived here. Like, that's how far back this goes. And so while we'll be cautious when we're drawing districts, we're not just drawing districts based on race. We can definitely draw districts cognizant of the communities of interest around the Latino and Asian communities. Another strongly Latino community, Hillview, again, you're talking, 75% population being Latino. I'll note that, I'll get into this in more detail, but when I talk about ethnicity, there's 2 kind of metrics. There's the ethnicity of the total population, which can be very interesting. But then there's the ethnicity of the citizen voting age population, which is a proxy for the eligible voters. And by federal law, we have to look at the ethnicity based on eligible voters. Not voter registration, not total population, eligible voters. It's just federal law. And as a result, you're going to see in a lot of these areas where something is a 60% Latino area, When we look at the citizen voting age population, it might drop to 50% Latino. So you might see in areas where the Latino population is more heavily non-citizen, or where there are more kids that are Latino, making up those Latino numbers, that the Latino numbers are actually dropping. And in fact, I think I put that back here in, sorry, I was trying to go back. I think I put this back here in one of the earlier slides, and I just didn't read it. See here on the left, it says 46% Asian by population in the district, 47% citizen voting age population. So the Asian population goes up a percentage point when you transition from looking at all population to just the eligible voters. The Latino population is 35% in the district, but that share of Latino population drops to 29% when you look at citizen voting age population. And that is the number that we're required to look at, because that's the effectively like the voting power population.
I think I'm still a little confused when you say 46% Asian by population and underneath that 47% by citizen voting age population. And my simple little mind just
Yeah.
can't figure out where are the children?
So if we're doing the annual census and we count every person living in the district, kid, citizen, non-citizen, irrespective
It's so
of anything.
inconvenient to have you way over on my left.
Sorry.
Should be in front of us.
I'm happy to go up there. That helps. Does that help people for me to go up there?
I'd like to see you while you talk, and that's
Yeah,
a
sure.
little hard.
I'll be turning my back. Yeah, I'll do a little bit. When we look at the total population of the district, in this Asian example, 46% of the entire population of the district is Asian.
Okay,
But kids don't vote and non-citizens don't vote.
okay.
So when we move the kids and the non-citizens out, the Asian population actually grows by 1 percentage point in terms of a share of total population that is adult citizens. Latinos do the opposite. Latinos are 35% of all people in the district. But when we move out the kids and we move out the non-citizens and we recalculate based on just looking at eligible voters, their share actually goes down quite a bit from 35 to 29%. It's because
That's almost 20 points.
it's,
No.
I mean, from 35 to 29 is a 6-point drop. So it is almost 20% of the total Latino concentration
Huh.
reduces. So you're right there. Are you a math teacher? So that drop is significant. One more stark way of putting it is that the Asian population is about half, no matter how you count it, 46, 47, that's about half of the population. But the Latino population drops from being over a third of the population to being over a quarter of the population. So it is a significant drop in their voting power versus their overall, and that's true in California statewide. In California statewide, we have, 40% Latino. In eligible voters, we have 33% Latino. In registered voters, it's 28% Latino. In turnout, it might be 25% Latino. So that diminishing number is a function of a lot of the Latino population being non-citizen or kids relative to white or Asian or Black populations.
So earlier, if I heard you correctly, you said that legally we can only use as a factor the citizen voting age population,
When we draw
not the other
districts-
demographics.
No, exactly. And I'll tell you the reason why. Let's say you're in Texas, where they did want to try to use total population for Latino to draw districts. And they draw a district that's 50% Latino.
Bothering me that you're giving the people the back. I get that we want to hear. I don't know if it's possible for him to stand like on the side and get a mic or something so that he's not
They
giving,
can go over there.
yeah, so that he's not giving the community his back. I'm sorry. I'm feeling very uncomfortable. Will we lose him?
Could you turn off that mic? I didn't turn it off before I left. Is this better? Okay. So it's a really interesting question. So let's say that in Texas, they were trying to draw districts based on total population. The federal courts told them they couldn't. But the purpose was they wanted to say, okay, we're going to draw a district outside of San Antonio. We're going to draw it majority minority Latino. 50% Latino by total population. Well, you draw a 50% Latino district by total population in San Antonio, and you look at the registered voters, now among registered voters, it's going to be like 25% Latino. Not enough to actually affect the outcome of an election. So you have to look at the eligible voter population when you try to elevate the Latino community up to be a majority minority district. That's where this comes, where the rubber meets the road is in an election, you don't want to draw districts that artificially dilute the voting power of any minority group. And when you're calculating the percentage of a potential electorate that is Latino or Asian, you want to look at the actual eligible voters, not some inflated number that includes every kid or non-citizens or people who are there, migrant workers that are coming in and out or anything like that. You want to actually count the people who are eligible voter can affect the outcome of an election, because you would be diminishing the voting power of the Latino community if you drew it based on a artificially high total population number. And what's interesting is the reason we use citizen voting age population and not registration is because in the South, in the 60s, they tried drawing districts and they were looking at registered voters, and the easiest way to make a Black community not be effective as a voting majority is to invalidate all their registrations. So you couldn't use voter registration either. You can't use voter registration ethnicity, you have to use citizen voting age population. So it's that's why we're going to be using that. The census is 18 plus citizens.
Over, and you qualify to register to vote, right? Right?
There might be a little subtle, tiny thing, like if you're somebody who's had your voting power taken away because you're institutionalized, you still be counted as a citizen of voting age population. So that's a tiny tiny thing. Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, so I don't think I got that, so people on Zoom could hear. It's the CRB,
CVRA?
yes,
Oh, CVAP.
CVAP is if you're 18 or over, you can vote, you can register to vote. It doesn't necessarily mean like if you're registered to vote, because there might be a higher number of people that could qualify for
Yeah.
that, so long as they qualify.
Yeah. And what this causes is that you will oftentimes draw a district that's 52% Latino.
Uh-huh.
But then when you actually look at the voter file, you'll see, oh, in this voter file, it's only 48% Latino in terms of registered voters. And then you look at turnout, it might only be 45% Latino. So there is a diminishing. And in some redistrictings, like when we did redistricting in Kern County, MALDEF came in and said, we want these districts at 60% Latino. And the board was like, why do we have to draw these at 60% Latino? And the attorneys told them, well, MALDEF is arguing, rightly so, that lower Latino turnout means that these districts won't be effective as Latino seats if they're only 51% Latino. We need to elevate them up to higher. I don't know that's necessarily true in this case, or even that we'll get to it, how high we could draw Latino CVAP in a district. But the idea is that if we're, you know, in a perfect situation, we would draw districts so that when they were drawn, they would be effective. And so that's why we use CVAP and not the total population numbers. And that's why, and that's the issue about registered voter populations too.
Slightly random question.
Uh-huh.
Are Indo-Americans included in the Asian population, or they're part of the other group?
The only populations that are oftentimes considered Asian that are not in the Asian population are Alaskan Natives and Hawaiian Americans. They're in a separate category. The census categories are weird and they're redoing them to like create an Arab category too in the next redistricting. But right now it's just Asian, Latino, Black, and then there's this white Hispanic, white non-Hispanic, and then there's the Native Alaskan, Native American, and Hawaiian categories. So Hawaiian is like Polynesian. So a lot of people consider them Asian as well because they're South Asian sub. So. But I don't think you have large Hawaiian or Alaskan Native. We did redistricting in Alaska, so that was fun. So when we looked at those, and I like being up here, I can see this a little better. Evergreen Valley High was one of the most heavily Asian districts, and you can see that 82% Asian by population, 72% Asian by citizen voting age population. North Valley, which are in different parts of the map. In fact, down here in the corner, you can see that that blue box is kind of highlighted in a silhouetted version of the map. Evergreen Valley is kind of to the northeast of us, and North Valley is up to the north of us. And you can see that's a district, that's a neighborhood that's 75% Asian by citizen voting age population. One that I thought was interesting, I mentioned it earlier because of the Hyler Velodrome, and that's just down south of us. 40% Latino, 40% Asian. And I thought that was a good last neighborhood to look at because that is kind of one of the issues that you face here is a very diverse population with lots of population density from Asian and Latinos. So we got a lot of public submissions through the online mapping tool, and I would recommend everybody go on the online mapping tool. It's on the website. You can click on the tool. It's really fun to draw. It doesn't require a lot of technical skill. You can draw one district. You can draw an entire plan. You get to submit it. You can name it. And you can even email into the board and say, I created map number 12345, and this is why. The maps that we got were kind of two families. There was one family of maps that was really looking like they were drawn based on the attendance zones as a community of interest. And they would name their maps like attendance zone area. There was another set of maps that were drawn, and in fact, named like the equity map. These are maps that were drawn seemingly to try to capture and strengthen the voting power of Latinos in one district, and then the other districts, and I'll go through this, would be heavily Asian districts. So when we look at the school district attendance boundaries example, this is one that was literally named draw by attendance zones. 300, 300 is the number of the map. You can see when we take this map, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this map just the outlines, and behind it I'm going to put in colored lines for the colored areas for the attendance zones. You can see like that District 5, I think that's called Independence Attendance Area, is that right? Independence High Attendance Area. That is almost perfectly, or it is absolutely perfectly within that attendance zone.
Can you name the page numbers that you're on?
That's 22.
Okay, just to make
Yeah.
sure I'm on the same one.
Yeah. So what I've done here is I've taken the district boundaries and I've overlaid it with the dark lines, and behind it put the attendance area zone, so you can see where this map is kind of piggybacking on the attendance area zones. Obviously, there's more attendance area zones than there will be districts. You can't do it perfectly, but this person sure did a lot of work to try to follow the lines of the attendance zone as they were drawing the districts. I think they did a great job. I mean, there's little weird things, but for the most part, this is really great. In the data tables that come with every map, we have the total population, the every resident population from the 2020 census in a data table on the top. Then we have the citizen voting age population on the bottom in a different data table. And when we look at the citizen voting age population of this map drawn by the attendance zones, we see that district number 1 at 36.8, so basically 37% Latino. So if we go back here, this district number 1 in the middle is the most Latino district. It's 37% Latino. Page 21 there. So when we go here, that district is 37% Latino, that district number 1. And districts 3, 4, and 5, 3 and 4 are 46%, 49% Asian, and district 5 is 61% Asian. In a technical jargon way, that 61% Asian district, oftentimes they would use the term that it's packed, meaning that there's more Asians put in that district than that would be necessary for Asians to be able to elect a candidate of choice. And when you see a 2.2% district, you might think that one might be cracked. meaning probably possible to get that over 50%, which makes it a majority minority district. But by making it under the majority minority district, you're kind of divorcing some Asian voters from that district in a way that cracks their voting power. And so that's the concern with this map and other maps that look like it, is the inability to draw districts that are over 50% Latino or Asian when there are other maps that do that. And I'll show those here in a second. This is called the equity map. Now, we might debate this district number 2 that sweeps from one side of the district, and that's a big kind of large district that might not make a lot of sense from a geographic sense. But this district breakdown shows here district number 1 is 54.9% Latino. So that would be a majority minority district. If we're drawing congressional districts, that would be a majority. That's what we would be looking to try and do. The 3 Asian districts that are highlighted here are 59% Latino, 56% Latino, and 55% Latino. Rounding to the, sorry, Asian. So here you have 1 district that's majority minority Latino, 3 districts that are majority minority Asian. And the last district, number 5, which is probably the one in the south, looking at the ones on the other. So that district number 5, that's the only district that doesn't have an Asian or a Latino majority. So we took 3 maps that were public submissions and we modified them or just kind of cleaned them up to make them draft maps A, B, and C for you to look at. And one of the conditions we wanted to make sure we held to was the idea of not packing or cracking any of those districts, making sure that we were drawing districts that were, you know, since many public submissions have these majority minority districts, we wanted to make sure all the public draft maps that we create also have those majority minority districts. We didn't want to create a permission structure for the board to think like, well, the demographer drew a map that didn't do that, so we'll just stop that one. The draft map 300-295, no idea who drew that. But if you look going back and forth, this is draft map A, and this is 30295. There's just a tiny little scotch of a difference. It's just like balancing the population a tiny bit. So really not a structural difference at all. Draft map B is 300-296. And
Could you
that
go
one
back to
has-
that and show where that difference takes place? Just maybe like there's the laser on there that
there's no laser on this.
it's, so if we look at the brown and red area, see where those interface? That little, you know. Yeah, because it's tough to catch. So what if you could now toggle between the two and they'll be able to see.
Draft map B, based on 30296. Draft map B based on 30296. This is a little bit more, I think. Oh no, this is almost nothing. I can see a little change in the red to green and the red to yellow.
Are you comparing maps A and B?
I'm comparing maps, Plan B, and its precursor, 300296.
So A and B.
No, map B.
So what?
Now we're looking at map B and what I used to draw map B from.
So the differences that you're seeing is what was publicly submitted and then what redistricting partners did to make sure that it met the regulations per the law.
Yeah, just to balance it or fix the population or follow a major boundary or something. And then draft map C was based on 300-848. I think this one I made a little bit, some more significant changes. Yeah, so in this one, there's a little bit more significant changes. So 300-848 to draft map C. Look at district number 3 and 300-848, how it comes all the way across the red district. Look at that. Does it work? It's not, it works on the black, but it doesn't work very well. You can see. So see in this District 3 here, where on the draft map, it came all the way across. In my draft map C, Plan C, it doesn't come all the way across there in order, I think, to make that District 3 a little bit higher Latino population, meet other criteria. So we can, anybody can look at the draft maps and these public submissions and, you know, if they want to dive in and look at any more differences. But I think the point is that these draft maps really do just take the public's work and call it our own. Like, I don't do a lot of work. But it's not laziness. It's the idea of, at the end of the day, being able to say that your draft map was, you know, derived from a public submission, not by one of you or by some demographer out of Sacramento. It was drawn by the public. So one of the things that we have on the website is all those maps in big PDFs, and then all these maps, you can go on a laptop or even your phone right now, and you can look at the map on a web interface where you can type in an address. And so I just typed in where we are here today, and you can see the little dot come up or where we are. You can type in any address if you want to figure out where that address is or what district it's in. So draft map A, we looked at that initially, but I just want to kind of dive into it a little bit more. And first, what I want to do is show how it matches with the attendance zones, or where it doesn't match with the attendance zones. And I think it's mostly, except for district number 4, which does somewhat follow that natural kind of layout of the independence attendance area. For the most part, it's ignoring the attendance areas zones. It's trying to use the demographic breakdowns and major roads to create straighter lines and to create kind of districts that are more contiguous and more compact. But at the same time, I think one of the real focuses of this map was based on like that equity map, making sure that we're not diluting the voting power of any of the minority groups.
Question about this map. So this is 2 overlays. That's a community drawn map plus our attendance boundaries. Is that right?
Yeah, just to show what they look like.
Okay, but even though the districts do not need to necessarily align with our attendance boundaries per se, the districts do need to align with the overall district boundaries, right?
Oh, the external boundaries, of course. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
the same. Yeah.
So like you were just showing, if you go back. No, yeah, okay. So the black
Your
line-
attendance boundaries don't take in part of your actual district where there's no population. So like there's parts of the hillsides that are in an attendance zone, the way you've drawn your attendance zones, that aren't actually in the district. Or in the inverse, parts of the district, there's a hillside with a cow on it. Somebody, whoever drew your attendance boundaries didn't actually put it in a,
Is that what this part is?
yeah,
That
it's part of your district that you don't actually,
There's no people.
nothing there.
I see.
The James Lick attendance area extends all the way to Mount Hamilton Observatory. So all
Yeah,
that-
out Mount Ham,
all
yeah.
that space is just, it's huge, but it's not populated with families and students
Yeah, so
and voters in this case.
we did a lot of work with your district and with the county to make sure that we had your right legal boundaries. But your attendance zones were probably drawn a little bit more with a, you know, an eye towards just, it was just drawn with a slightly different boundary difference. But there's not, we will always double check and work with the county to make sure that any discrepancies are fixed. But our boundary is the one that we're told is your population boundary. We didn't draw your attendance zones.
Thank you.
Good eye, though.
Mhm.
So when we look at that district plan 1, I haven't talked a lot about this, but at the very beginning, I said districts need to be equal population. They need to be under 10% deviation, meaning the difference between the largest district, the smallest district has to be less than 10%. So the largest district is 4,500 population over, 4.1% over. The smallest district is 2.2% under. So you add the absolute value there, you get a 6.3% total plan deviation. It's under 10%. It's kind of a binary. Is it under 10% or not? If somebody comes forward and says, aha, I drew a district that was 6.1% deviation, so now my map's better than yours, that's not necessarily true. It's just a criteria that you need to meet the threshold. When we look at the citizen voting age population, Latino CVAP in District 1 is 50.5%. The Asian CVAP in the districts 3, 4, and 5 are 50.1, 63.1, and 51.0. So we have districts that are over 50%, 3 of them in the Asian population and 1 Latino over 50%. When we look at draft plan B, now you start to see a little bit more where the decisions are kind of tacking to the attendance boundary. So the district here, District 2, you can see the northern boundary of District 2 is trying to follow the attendance boundaries. Is kind of like a, tiebreaker goes to the attendance boundary kind of rule. And you see that also in District 4 a little bit more, kind of drawing around the attendance boundaries. Not a complete allegiance to the attendance boundaries, but using them as kind of a backup guide as you're drawing the districts. And this draft plan, deviation of 3%. Latino CVAP in that district, the central one, 53.4, and then 3 Asian CVAP, 51.5, 64.6, and 53.8. Draft Plan C. Now in this one, that District 3 is the one that will be the majority-minority district. And when we look at the attendance zones, again, you start to see little places where the boundary, like between District 1 and 2, you can see it's kind of following attendance zones. Between 1 and 5, it's following attendance zones. Along District 4, it's following some part of the attendance zone. So attendance zones are again being used as a way of snapping the district boundaries to the attendance zones when possible. The deviation on this one's larger, 8.6%. It's actually 8.7, so we'll fix that. And in terms of the citizen voting age population, Latino 52.5 in that central district number 3, and then the 3 Asian majority minority districts, 53.4, almost 60%, and 54.4. So I don't want to add to all the confusing new information and arcane facts about districting, but one of them is that at the end of the day, these seats are going to be used to elect people. And the law requires that we come up with a system, a potential numbering system, and assigning election dates, which will be the potential election dates for each of the districts. Rather than going to each map and assigning a numbering and election system, what we choose to do is that say that districts 1, 3, and 5 will come up in 2026, and 2 and 4 will come up in 2028. That follows a convention in the county and in the state that most local elections where you have 5 seats, the odds come up one year, the evens come up another year. Now, when we pass the plan, we'll have this potential numbering system. But after we've agreed on the lines and all the line drawing work is done, we can then look and see, okay, one of the trustees lives in district number 1 and they're up in 2028. We'll make that an even numbered district so that it's up in 2028. You can do things like that just to kind of adjust the numbering and election order so that it doesn't, for no reason, have an election come up out of turn of whatever incumbent's going to be living in that district. But we won't be looking at where incumbents live in the district as we're drawing the lines. It's only after the lines have been adopted that we'll address that issue. So where we're at right now is at this meeting, kind of a midway point. Not only a midway point in the number of hearings, but also a midway point in kind of this demarcation line between pre-map hearings and post-map hearings. Everything that's been discussed so far has been about communities of interest, getting public engagement. Now, we'll still talk about those things, but a lot more focus will probably be on people actually arguing about where actual lines go and trying to decide which map they prefer more. So it changes the conversation from being more abstract to more kind of just limited choices kind of issue. We're going to have a community of interest next week that I'll be coming down for as well. July 15th, we're going to be having this hearing on revised draft maps. And then we will have a hearing or a final vote, the draft map. The final vote will be at a to be decided date. I don't think we know that yet, right? Yeah.
Sorry, new mics for us. Just can you clarify, please, your role in this? So what I gathered is that the community has submitted some maps.
Mhm.
And then your firm tweaked them to make sure that they were within that standard deviation or whatever, right? But I, for one, as one board member, am looking for district maps that produce this. And I didn't see that up here. So can we ask you to further tweak those maps to produce this or,
Well, so the couple things. One is the Federal Voting Rights Act has all these weird things, right? Where we're supposed to draw districts and be cognizant of the racial impact of the districts and not diluting voting power and all that kind of stuff. But we're also, because of equal protection, 14th Amendment, not able to discriminate based on race. So there's this weird thing we have to do where we are cognizant of and aware of and talk about and can have this be part of the conversation about ethnicity. But at the same time, if you said, hey, that district number 4, can you make sure it elects a Latino? I can't, that's not part of the process. You do have a unique composition with right now you have 2 Latino candidates, 2 Asian candidates, and other. Yeah. Perfectly okay. I heard her say that. So there was an editorial in the local paper about why don't they have 2 Latino districts in any of the draft maps? I invite the public. Try to draw 2 Latino majority minority districts. You can't. If you draw the weakest Latino district, yeah. So a member of the public wrote an editorial saying
In the room.
to draw 2 Latino districts. And my invitation is try. We can't, in the drawing we've done to try to look at the majority minority districts, if we take the majority minority district in any of these draft plans, A, B, or C, and we weaken it as much as we can to make that only 50%, 50.00001, which is going to be required by federal law to draw a majority minority district when you can. If we do that, the most Latino district we can draw after that would be a 43% Latino district. And that 43% Latino district also happens to be like 42% Asian. What you end up doing is foregoing the opportunity to create a majority minority Asian district in order to create a 43% Latino district, which based on federal law would not be considered a Latino opportunity to elect district. Because when we actually looked at voter registration, it would probably be predominantly Asian. When we look at actual voter turnout, it might even be more so Asian. So if we could draw 2 majority minority Latino districts, 2 majority minority Asian districts, and 1 other, that would be one of the options. But it's just not mathematically possible.
Yeah. Question. So when we think about how we got here today, I mean, there's a number of reasons, but really what pushed us to get here was that lawsuit.
Mhm.
That lawsuit stated explicitly what Patty is suggesting, right? So if the lawsuit is saying one thing, but then the current law says another, it contradicts each other. So I don't know if you've seen situations like that before and what has been the outcome.
So the letter to you from Kevin Shankman says that there's racially polarized voting and points to other issues he's concerned about that have to do with the board's policies, having to do with ethnic issues regarding the board's policies. The letter from Kevin Shankman could have said, you need to draw 2 majority minority districts, but it didn't. I'm sure he knows that he has a demographer like me that I know. He worked with me in the city of Los Angeles and he's respected. And I'm sure they know that you can't draw 2 majority minority districts here. Whether it's his intent or not, what the drafting of a plan with 1 majority minority district that's Latino will do is by mathematically make it as such that the Latino community will be able to elect a candidate of choice. Doesn't mean that that person's going to be Latino. That means the candidate that's the candidate of choice for the Latino community in that district. But if you have historically elected more Latinos district-wide, it might actually undercut the goal of electing more Latinos district-wide. That's not something we unfortunately have a power to kind of balance. If you were to say, we're really concerned, so we're going to draw 2 districts that are Latino, 46%, citizen voting age population Latino, that would kind of facially be probably a Federal Voting Rights Act violation. So I don't have a answer.
That's helpful. Another question is, I noticed that a lot of the maps, they have like the CRVA or what's that?
CVAP?
CVAP. Okay, let's just say CVAP. They were at like 50% or 60%, all of them, right? Does it have to be 50% or 60%? Can it, and I get that the standard deviation has to be under 10%, which by the way, I'm pretty sure I heard in previous conversations that the standard deviation couldn't, like, had to be around 2.75 or something like that. We'd have to go back and see that and just make sure that we're super clear, because that's something that I left with. But my question really here is, does it have to be 50, 60? Could it be 30, 30, 30, 60, 40, 17, whatever, some other iteration?
The issue is, and I'm not your attorney, but having worked in a lot of redistrictings, when the public comes forward and draws draft maps, and they have drawn multiple draft maps that are over 50% of one ethnicity, protected class, so Latino, Asian, Black, or when we work in Glendale, Armenian population, or if we look in San Diego, Chaldean population, whatever it's going to be, if you can draw 50% or more of that one population, making it a district where that community has the opportunity to elect a candidate of choice based on how the courts have reviewed these districts, it really is tough to walk out of the process and not at least match what the public has done in terms of the number of districts over 50% of one ethnicity. So if we were drawing the city of Los Angeles districts, and of their 15 districts, they could draw 9 majority minority districts that are either majority minority, Black, Asian, or Latino, and the city council passed a plan that had 7, they'd be in court the next day. Because it's been proven that you can draw them, and the only reason, you'd have to come up with a really overwhelming, compelling reason to not draw all of those majority minority districts.
That's helpful. Thank you.
So, when we finish the drawing map, the board will make the approval. After you get all of these comments and all of this map gathered from the community, when you finalize it, the map, and you present it to us, and the board of Eastside will make the decision, but actually that already done deal. So we just need to approve it. That's all. Isn't it true?
Yeah, so the way the process is that you will be the ones deciding on the map. You're required to have the 5 hearings. You're having even more than that. You're required to follow the process. At the end of the day, you're going to be voting on the final map. And I can't say anything about it. I can't tell you how to vote on your final map. You're going to be doing that. That's entirely in your power. There is a process. If in 2030, when you're doing redistricting, you said, we've had it, we don't want to do this, you could appoint 10 people in this room here today, make them a commission, give them the power to draw the map, and they could just go draw the map and tell you what the map is, and you don't get to vote on it at all. But outside of that process, right now, at the end of the day, you'll be approving the map, and then I'll be working with the county to make sure that that map goes to the county for the next election. They adjust precinct boundaries and all that kind of stuff so that you can actually hold the election in those districts.
And what happened, like on the map, we actually don't know our address at all. Will be in the map that when people drawing, we're not knowing that we are in District 1 or District 5, and what happened if we move or if we stay in the district at the election time, correct?
Yeah, so we'll draw these maps without any awareness of where incumbents live. And the way that it works is that at the next election, you'll go down to the county and you'll pull papers for running in your district, and they'll ask you your address. You sign an affidavit saying your address is this and you're a registered voter there, and that's the district you get to run in. And so if somebody does get drawn two people in one district and one of them moves to another district, they can run in that other district. That's actually one thing that's interesting to make a point of. We're going to draft these maps, we're going to pass these maps, but they don't actually take effect until somebody gets elected into those districts. So we're going to have a board in 2026 that's going to have 3 board members in 2027. We'll have 3 board members who are elected in districts, and the other 2 were elected at large. So it's like a hybrid district for 2 years. And in 2028, the last 2 board members will get elected. Now you're going to have all 5 board members in districts. And then in 2031, you'll redistrict all of it again. You get to do it all over.
A variation on that line of questioning. If 2 current board members end up in the same district and one concludes a term in 2026 and the other one concludes a term in 2028, and the sequencing is odd numbered goes first cycle, even numbered goes the second cycle, how does that work out? Because yeah.
So this is one of the most confusing parts of the process. But what's your name? Jeff. If Jeff and I were drawn into district number 1, and I was up in 2026 and he was up in 2028, you'd have 2 options. You'd say, we're setting that election for 2026, so both you guys go run for it if you want to. And my term would end in 2026 and I would run for that seat. And his term ends in 2028, he might run for that seat too. You want to know what happens? If I win, he stays on the board anyway because he's already elected until 2028 in the at-large seat. If he wins, he resigns his 2028 seat, and you guys now can elect somebody, or you guys get to appoint somebody district-wide to fill that seat. Maybe you'd appoint me to this seat, since I was the nice guy
Point
losing.
Eddie Garcia.
There you go. So that's how the process works when you have 2 people with different election cycles drawn in the same district. When it's 3, it's the same thing too. Sorry, put you on the spot.
In that scenario, if the person with an even numbered due for reelection in 2028, if they don't run in
If
the
they don't run, so Jeff
2026
doesn't run, he says, Paul, I don't want to run against you. I'm not going to run. So I get reelected in 2026. And then if he wants to serve on the board, he has to wait around until 2030 to run again because the seat won't be up for 4 more years. So his term will expire and he just leaves because there's
Oh.
no seat for him to run for.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Any other question from the board? Not, then I think we open the question from our, that's public comments, right?
Before we start with public comment, I would like to publicly recognize 2 people that used to sit
Thank-
on this dais with us.
Yes.
One is our former trustee,
Eva.
Eddie Garcia,
Yes.
and the other is our former student board rep, Antonio Kobe Lopez. So
Yeah.
say hi to everyone.
Hi.
Welcome. Good to see you both.
Thank you, Board Trustee Patty. Yes, I also want to recognize that, Tony and Eddie Garcia. So let's move on to this public comments. The first one I would like to invite is Jack Hammer. And Jack, you have 5 minutes. Follow Jack is Antonio Mendoza.
You want to explain why Jack has 5
5
minutes
minutes.
and others don't?
Okay, Jack is the president of ESTA, and we always give 5 minutes for ESTA representative as well as CSEA representative. So we have 5 minutes, and the other one has 2 minutes. The other one has 2 minutes, yes.
Hey, Jack, until they have the timer up, do you want me to give you like when you got a minute left? Okay. Go ahead and start.
Test. Good evening. My name is Jack Hamner, President of Eastside Teachers Association. This will take far less than 2 minutes. Since this is an agenda item, I wanted to ask a question for the 4 of you and hopefully Brian Doe as well. We have a lot of concerns about gerrymandering And so my question to all of you, it's actually a two-part question, is have you created any of the trustee area maps? Or are you aware of anybody that has created one within something, some type of a map that would benefit you? So kind of a loaded question, so be careful.
A very fair question and appropriate. And the answer on my part is no, I'm not participating in map drawing, nor am I collaborating with anybody on map drawing. And I think it ought to be that way on our part.
I appreciate that, but you also have no knowledge of anybody that has done one in
That's correct.
representing
No
you.
knowledge of
you
anyone
go.
who's doing something on behalf of my interests.
So you want to ask each one of us to answer your question,
Oh,
Jack?
heck yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, I have not involved it in the map drawing either, and I just probably will go to the one community workshop on June 9th. Just want to see on June 30th. I missed the one on June 9th, so I will go on the one on June 30th. It's close to Independence, so kind of like has some feeling about drawing map, but I not gonna be involved on the drawing map.
This is the first time seeing them tonight.
No. Not involved.
And somehow we'll elicit a response from Brian Doe at some point, I hope. Yeah. I don't know if he's watching or not, but it's a different, oh, okay, it's a different time zone. It's probably like 3 a.m. there or something. I don't know. Get out of bed, Brian. Answer the question. We'll get it later.
Yeah, Brian is out today, and that's why I'm step over as a board president to run the meeting. Thank you.
May I
Jack.
add a
Yes.
comment? That the only time when I see myself wrestling with actual where our boundaries were proposed is when it comes to us with any options, final options to look at or a final option to look at. I'm still going to objectively not factor my interest into that. I want to see how it actually works in satisfying community interests and legal interests. And then it falls where it falls is the way I'm approaching it.
Thank you, board member. Board member. So let's move on to Antonio Mendoza.
I'll give you this when you've got 30 seconds left of your 2 minutes, fair?
Antonio Mendoza.
Yeah, you can move it.
Thank you. Hi, so I'm Antonio Mendoza.
Yes.
I'm a nonprofit leader in San Jose. I'm here as a community member
A little
today.
closer to the mic there.
Okay, I'm here today as a community member, not representing any of the organizations that I have worked with or currently work with. And I found out during this meeting today that the process of drawing these new districts is a lot more complicated than it seemed, but like I still think that the concerns that many in the Latino community have expressed about the decreased representation they might see from the new districts are valid. I would like to make sure that we consider as much as possible creating districts where we can see the students that I have supported throughout my career on the East Side, Latino and Vietnamese American, have the opportunity to one day serve on this board, whose composition I really do appreciate. And I think is something very special that we should preserve where possible. So with these upcoming community workshops, I hope that we do try to draw those maps that are mathematically impossible. I, again, would like to see all of the students who are currently in the East Side one day have the opportunity to sit in the seats that you sit in right now. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you. The next person is that Alvin Lee. No, oh, Aaron. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name.
It's pronounced Erin Lee.
Aaron, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Erin Lee. I am speaking today as both a member of this district. I work at Andrew Hill. I've worked here the past couple years. And also as a product of this district, I graduated from Evergreen many more years ago. I still live in Evergreen with my parents. So like I'm invested in all levels. I looked at the proposed draft plans, and I think that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of equitable representation, both in terms of race, because I do feel like all three of the draft plan A, B, and C overrepresents the Asian population. but also in terms of socioeconomics, because I felt like affluent neighborhoods were overrepresented, specifically Santa Teresa, Evergreen, Independence, and like certain parts of other neighborhoods. Again, gerrymandering came up. I do want to speak specifically as someone who works at this school that I feel like our attendance zone should not be split up and subsumed by different districts because I feel like this school faces unique challenges. There are a lot of English learners here, a lot of McKinney-Vento, foster youth, justice engaged youth, and I would hate to see this specific community get split up into multiple different districts. Other than that, I appreciate the effort. Hope you guys have a good night.
Thank you, Aaron. The next person is Julio Pardo, who's the president of CSEA and will get 5 minutes.
Really pretty high.
So after Julio is Ashley Ward. And if anyone want to speak, please fill out the yellow piece of paper and give it to Mary Gillen. Thank you. Go ahead, Julio.
Good evening, Julio Pardo, President, CSCA, Chapter 187 East Foothills. You know, this is the second time I've attended this meetings. Excuse my voice is going out. But I've been in this district a long time. I've lived in San Jose for a long time. And it kind of hurts me when I see the way this is being put out there. Because I'm starting to feel like our district's becoming, if any of you can remember this, Yugoslavia, where we had one country that was all kinds of different ethnicities. And all of a sudden, because of the internal politics and et cetera, it split apart into all these different little groups because they all have their own little thing. You know, this district has been going well for a long time. And all of a sudden now it's like, we're actually splitting up basically because of ethnicities. And I just have a problem with that because there are so many different things. You can have a Latino community, but within that Latino community, there are different variations of people, the way they think about things. You can have the Asian community, and there's different ways they think about things because the Asians, I remember one time I was speaking to one of my students, and we were talking about languages, and another student said, why are there so many languages in Asia? And I remember responded and said, why are there so many languages in Europe? Look at the difference in size geographically. I'm sorry, shaking here, tired. It just seems that other than ethnicity, we got to look at other things. I mean, I appreciate the work they did, and I understand this was probably put up because of ethnicities, but there's got to be other reasons why that we could look at ways that we can make this more equitable. I'm not talking because I want more, because I'm Latino myself. I actually consider myself Californian. Every time someone tells me something, mainly because I can't speak Spanish, and I was put down for that as a child and as an adult. So to me, I'm Californian, and I don't care about other groups that want to just be themselves. And I hope I don't get in trouble for saying that. But there are other things within our organization that we should consider when we split up these groups. So that's all I want to say about this. There's a couple of things I'd like to add. Board, I did send you just recently some messages from a trip that you approved for us. I want to thank you for that. There's some photos there. And the last thing I want to say is I'm sorry I missed the last meeting. I'm glad you approved bringing back our campus monitors. Thank you.
Thank you, Julio Pardo. The next person is Ashley Ward. And followed with Kobe Lopez.
Actually, he's a president of one of our bargaining units, which is why you got 5. We're back to 2, and I'll give you the 30-second sign.
I don't think I'm going to need 2 minutes. I'm Ashley Ward. I am a parent at Santa Teresa High School. I have 2 topics, questions to ask you guys tonight. The first is I would like some feedback on how the community workshop at Santa Teresa went. So talking about like turnout, feedback, participation at that event. I was unable to make it there, but would like to know how that one went as we lead into the one coming on Monday. And then my second kind of question, or just kind of throwing it out there, At the beginning of this process, we talked about how typically it's a 90-day process to make this whole thing happen. You guys negotiated 180 days. By my calculation, 180 days should be August 14th from when the letter was given to you. So earlier in the evening when Superintendent, you said that the decision will be made this fall. I'd like to know what that timeline actually looks like because again, the letter was posted February 14th, 180 days is roughly August 14th. So what does that look like for our actual timeline and when we can expect a resolution on this? My understanding was that it would all be over or we would have a decision made on the July 26th meeting, I think is the next one, or 15th. So anyway, those are my two points for tonight.
We'll get you the final date of that. You're totally correct and want the crowd or those in attendance to know, yes, we did ask for, normally this process takes place in 90 days. And we're like, we are too massive a geographical and demographic area to be able to do this kind of business in 90 days. We did ask for the 180. And I believe why it falls a little is that we had 30 days to respond from when we received the letter. So add those dates in. But part of that is for the feedback for June 9. We had more laptops than people. We have more people here tonight than we had there, but I think there's also greater interest in maps now that people kind of see them and have been able to digest. So again, I want to welcome everybody to Independence High School on June 30th, this Monday. Phone a friend, or we'll see you there because you can see there that this is a complex process, but the more it does get maps get generated by the public, the better.
Yeah, I was there just a short time. I came late and I know I just very few people. Anyway, the next person I would like to invite is Kobe Lopez.
Long time no see.
Long time no see. Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, my name is Antonio Kobe Lopez. I'm currently employed by the city of San Jose, but I'm here in my own personal capacity. I'm a former student of Mount Pleasant High School, very proud to be a Cardinal. I wanted to take a moment to appreciate the board and the community's time working on this process. I think it's very important that we take proper consideration. Cultural considerations and the racial backgrounds of these neighborhoods and these districts are very important, and I recognize that. Recognizing that, I'll quickly comment and say that I believe of the draft maps proposed so far, if any of them have to be accepted as are, I would prefer that map B goes forward. I find that it has the best mix of racial groups and distributions, as well as best cohesion to attendance zones. However, I would like for further analysis, if at all possible, given census data, to consider income levels and socioeconomic factors. These are very important in our students' lives, and making sure that, as another public speaker mentioned earlier, we are considering the economic realities that our students face and the differences between them, especially if it's possible to include the average incomes and the distribution of incomes, the standard deviations in those regions. That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Melissa Rose Lopez, also is a trustee of Mount Pleasant. We forgot to announce you, but now you have a chance
We'll
to.
see how she chooses to identify this evening. Right?
So I am here, my name is Melissa Gott Lopez. I am here representing myself and a resident of Mount Pleasant neighborhood. I had a prepared speech, but after all the great information and really the complexity to this, I'm going to forego that. I just really want to say, one, I kind of echo some other sentiments of, I'm very disappointed that we are actually here in this place. I've always supported Eastside Union, and I believe our board has always been representative and inclusive and diverse. And I believe all of you have always supported all of our schools. So I'm a little dismayed at maybe breaking us up. And maybe creating some sort of division that I don't believe was ever really there. So I am a little disappointed in that. I do understand in the process, cultural and ethnicity are extremely important as well. But I have to also consider what everybody else said. My lived experience is more based on socioeconomic. I really believe that's really more of an important driver for how we are represented, my community of interest, really the commonalities between us. As I think economics is actually more relevant than race, in my opinion. Again, not dismissing any of that. Again, speaking where I live, you all know where that area is. We're kind of, I don't know, less than a mile, 2 miles away from an extremely little bit more affluent area. I just want to make that comment. So again, I recognize the importance of this decision. I recognize the work that needs to go into it. I echo what I think two of our trustees said about it's disappointing that we have to adhere to certain laws, but then they really go against really the spirit, I think, of what we're trying to do in representing our people. So in my opinion, I'm just disappointed that we're even at this space is what I would have to say. But I appreciate all of the work that you're all doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. The next guest speaker is Eddie Garcia, who is a former trustee of Eastside Union High School District. Welcome back to our Eastside here.
Thank you, Madam President, and hello, everybody. I want to make two comments to you, the board, and then a comment for Mr. Mitchell and a couple of questions. So the comment is, I'm very happy that you're there and I'm here. Just want to tell you that. The second comment is, and I think Trustee Lopez said it, and both trustees Cortese and Herrera said it, if it ain't broke, why fix it? But I know you have to comply with the California Voting Rights Act, and that's that. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. So here's my comment for Mr. Mitchell. The demographic that you need to use per federal law, I just want to clarify, is eligible voters, correct?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Eligible voters as seen in the citizen voting age population from the American Community Survey.
Okay. So the comment I want to make to everybody here and the audience back there that, you know, I can't think of a better way than say that law sucks because the board isn't, in that case, the board isn't representing the people of the district. The board is certainly not representing the students of the district. The board is required by law to represent the voters of the district. And those are three different audiences. And I think as a board, the students come first, the community comes second, and the voters come third. But the law is the law. So I'd like to see, can you give me a citation of what law it is? I just want to read it. Because just so you know, Mr. Mitchell, I was that silly guy that wrote that op-ed.
Oh, okay.
So I'd like to understand that a little bit better. And then the second thing I'd like to see, which is, I guess, a question, but more of a comment or request, is since we're talking about voters, I'd like to see the three maps or any map with a precinct overlay on it. Because I think that'll give, at least to me, not as one person, but you know, people that I've been talking to, a better shot at trying to figure out how to make that map work. Because you did offer a challenge on that. And so you know, I think we want to take you up on that challenge to see if we can make a map work. So if you could put on the website a map, A, B, or C, with precinct overlay on it, and it'll give a better sense of where the voters are and who they are.
I can definitely provide a precinct overlay. Just so you know, when the map is adopted, the precincts all get redrawn.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
That's
so
okay.
It doesn't have to follow the precinct.
No, just for the purpose, because, you know, I do, my overly simplistic argument I made in the editorial, the op-ed, is 221, which is in place now, just makes all the sense in the world when it comes to representing people and students. And if there is a way, you said there is no way, but if there is a way, I'd like to take a crack at it. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for your op-ed also. The next guest speaker is Christopher Andrade Smith.
Is there any? There we go. Hello, my name is Christopher Andrade Smith. I graduated from Evergreen Valley High School about a year ago now, and I volunteer a lot at the San Jose Peace and Justice Center. And something I definitely want to focus on with the current redistricting is really reinforcing the fact that when a community is under attack, they need to be heard in government. And in that context, we need to remember that currently there are very specific communities being attacked federally right now. That's an objective fact. And what we need to recognize is those communities are currently Latino, Chicano, homeless, poor people, people who are low income, people who are immigrants, people who are Muslim, people who are Middle Eastern, right? And those communities need to be heard. And that is why I believe it's also very important to recognize that when we are redistricting, because those communities are not heard federally. If they are not heard federally, they need to be heard by the government in some context. And in this context, that's the value of local level government. Another thing which is very, very important is recognizing that one of the most consistent things that changes how people vote is income. So definitely recognizing people's income. That is something which absolutely needs to be considered while we do the redistricting, because that's going to have a far heavier impact. The reality is, if we look at which income levels and how they vote, you're going to see a very distinct change. And I wanted to make sure that the board hears this and they consider it when they are engaging in their redistricting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Christopher. The last person is Chuck Cadrell. If I pronounce your name correct, apologize.
I'm Chuck Cantrell.
Chuck Cantrell.
Cantrell. But anyway, great to see you guys. Thank you so much for this work so far. I think it's a couple of things you should really consider, and that's the right to petition government. And that right is extended to the most marginalized people as well. So as you look at population distribution, it's important to recognize that you should not dilute that representation for marginalized communities. So that means that as a voter, if I'm 2% of the population, you're more likely to listen to me when you're running for reelection. If I'm only 1% of the population, because it's harder for me to impact the election, you're less likely to listen to me. So it's really important, even though that doesn't improve the likelihood of a Black person being elected, if you even out that distribution, it impacts their ability to affect government. That's a key constituency, and I hope that you reflect that in your mapping, the consistency spread across districts by marginalized communities as well. And that would include Filipino community, obviously Black community, and other communities as well. Really important. How many? Okay. I also wanted to just remind you that while you're doing this work, it's just really important for you to make sure that you're actually trying to reach out more to those communities as well, because I'm alone again. Thank you.
Chuck, can I ask you a question? Just clarify question, sorry. It was like your first big point, consistency spread across the district by marginalized communities. Did I
Yeah.
capture that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did a distribution map that kept it as best I could to at minimum to reflect the current population of the city, which is about 2.5% African American spread across every community. At least it reflects our community. It doesn't necessarily, well, as we know today, it can impact elections. 1 vote, 2 votes can impact an election these days.
Yeah.
But it is important in terms of representation and the ability to impact you listening to a citizen.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
Any other questions in the audience?
I have comment
Yeah,
on that
okay.
one.
Trustee, yes, yeah, go ahead. Patty.
So this is a question for Paul. I think you can probably stay there. I don't know. a couple of people brought up the point of looking at uh, socioeconomic status as a community or factor or community of interest. Probably not really a community of interest, probably more of a factor. But do you have that? I mean, obviously you have that data, but
Yeah.
does that data get factored into this process?
Yeah, and since it came up so much, I'm happy. I think the meeting's on Monday night, right? That I'm coming back. I'll create a map like that, those ethnicity maps to show income. There are a couple different ways sometimes to look at income. One can be the census data on income, but the census data on income comes from census block groups, not the smaller census blocks. So that map might look a little different than some of the maps you've seen. So it kind of dilutes the population a little bit. The other thing I can look at is like renter homeowner. I don't know if that's something that will pop a lot. You might know better than I would about how much that would correlate to socioeconomic status around the area. And those could be two things that you don't want to do a thing where you create a map that has 7 different things all at the same time, but I can create individual maps that show a couple things and then overlay the district boundaries to that so that they can see. And one of the things I do want to caution about, when we did redistricting in Oakland, the way that you draw the districts in Oakland, you have some heavily Latino districts, some heavily Black districts. And then you had this hillside district. It was basically like all the white population. And when you drew the map, it was like the most affluent district too. And so somebody came out and said, oh my God, they're drawing a district just for the rich people. And that wasn't the intent, obviously. The intent was to maximize the voting power of these underrepresented populations. But in effect, sometimes what will happen is you'll create a district and you'll say, why is that district so rich? Well, it might be so rich because that's where a heavily white population is or a heavily affluent population is. And the other districts are drawn to kind of empower minority or disaffected communities more.
All right, next to Trustee Herrera, go ahead.
My understanding is that legally we're compelled to address the needs of protected classes, which is not the same as communities of interest. Communities of interest can be factored in or considered to varying degrees, but as I'm hearing comments tonight, we're being admonished that whatever's adopted at the end, it include various of different communities of interest, when legally we're mostly driven by the law's requirement on protected classes, which are ethnic racial primarily.
Yeah, so we can be doing two things at the same time. So as an example, I showed 3 draft maps that I believe reflected public input and also are legal. They're all very different when you actually look at them. And if we were to overlay income or renter homeowner, or one of my clients in the last 2 statewide redistrictings has been the LGBTQ community, drawing maps that show where the LGBTQ community is, you could overlay these kind of things and decide that of these 3 maps that are all equally legal based on what you're talking about, this map is preferred because it does a better job of addressing these other community of interest issues. So we can do both things at once. I don't want to dismiss any community of interest testimony.
All right,
simply
I just
because-
wanted to get a better understanding and that helped.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I was happy to hear from former trustee Eddie Garcia that he's going to take a crack at trying to make a map work that creates two Latino districts, because whatever is advocated in these meetings by members of the community, the board is not going to step in and do this work. We're not going to draw maps, and the administration is not going to do it. If it doesn't happen out there in the community, if you just say you want to see it, but you don't get involved in it, it's not going to happen. The final thing is, what was one final point I had here? I don't remember, so I'll come back to it later.
I will make one subtle point. I don't want people to think that if you do end up drafting a map that's 1 Latino majority minority district, 3 Asian majority minority districts, that you're going to forever have fewer than 1 Latino board member. What that does mean is that a Latino board member who wins in a district that's 28% Latino and 52% Asian is going to have to speak to the issues of the Vietnamese community in order to get elected. But the drawing of districts doesn't determine the ethnic composition of the board. but it does determine the focus of the candidates running in those districts to make sure that they can reach across and discuss the issues of communities that are the voting majorities.
Truly. And my experience is that as the Asian, primarily Vietnamese community has developed, has established their presence more and more strongly, that where they see opportunities, as they would in a Asian majority dominant district, the odds of them fielding a good, strong candidate would rise. That as they do in District 7 City Council, you know, and what have you. So it is going to change the dynamics here.
Absolutely. Trustee Chavez, do you have any questions?
So I took down notes from the speakers. So one of the things that has been brought up over and over again is the socioeconomic status, the income piece. And what I heard you say, Paul, is that by the Monday meeting, you'll have something along those lines. We also had someone ask about getting more details on the law. Is that something that's like, I know that in the PowerPoints, there's little snippets here and there, but can that also be included? And
Yeah, I think the Brennan Law Center has a good kind of summary of Federal Voting Rights Act law that I can provide to the board, and that you can make sure any members of the public who are asking about it get it.
yeah,
We could also put a link to that kind of in a frequently asked questions section on the website or something
yeah, I
like
want to
that.
make sure that it's accessible to
Sure.
everybody to like be able to access the law. And then there was also a request for precinct overlay.
Yeah.
When will that?
I can have that by Monday too, I presume. I'll just make sure that I have the most recent precincts in California change constantly.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'll make sure that I have the most recent shapefile, and I'll just create an overlay.
Okay, and then the other things that I just want to like reiterate that I heard, taking the federal level context into this conversation. I know that could, like, there's many ways that we can think about that, but I didn't want to miss that. Consistency spread across the district by marginalized communities and outreach to constituencies more.
Mhm. Yeah, Board Trustee Herrera?
I remembered the point that I couldn't remember a moment ago, and that is that in pretty much every meeting we've had people say to us that we should reach out more to this or that sector of the community. Couple of things is the board what we've done, and then I'd like the superintendent to describe the level of outreach that we've done by email, by communications and whatnot, so that this has been widely made known or noticed throughout all the communities that we have. But to ensure turnout at these kinds of meetings, you actually need someone to organize, you know, and the board cannot take on organizing in someone's community, and the administration, they're already dealing with a lot, and this is summertime when a lot of them are off on vacation. So if you have a concern that your community needs to be more strongly represented at these gatherings, that's work that is going to be mostly incumbent on the community itself to reach out to more people to come to be more involved in here. That's just a reality as I see it.
All right, yeah, I remember that not too many people show up every time that we have a public hearing. Everyone has a different interest, and I know that community outreach, I know that the district has done a good job. I received several emails.
Yeah. And in fact, if the superintendent could describe the nature of outreach that has been done by the district.
Sure. Look, we've sent out multiple invitations. It's forefront on our website, obviously, but that cannot always be the highest traffic. I think when we email out for these invitations, our e-list is about 60,000 folks right now, targeting this number of groups. We've met individually with some interest groups when they've requested. We haven't gone out and like individually said, we want to meet with you and UNO. But when requested, we make sure we make ourselves available to that. And if I may, like what I love about Eastside is we're hearing a lot of things tonight. Well, in some things, it sounds like either two things are equally true, even though sometimes they can seem diametrically opposed, which is it's good that we're doing this trustee area voting. Are we going to become, to Pardo's term, balkanized? Are we going to lose a sense of our collective will and what we want for students and become isolated by neighborhoods or by ethnicity? And I just want to say whatever output got this group into this room to voice those things, really voicing the soul of kind of who Eastside is and what we want for people, great. The more that individual groups can be, that you can outreach and have more people there on Monday to learn how to do these maps, fantastic. But yeah, I will say that email has primarily been our forum, and not just to parents and students, which we have, but also to other community groups and civic leaders.
And you use the figure 60,000?
I think I'm rounding up from 59,985 when I say that, but yeah, it's like right there.
And it's been more than one communication.
Yeah, I think you probably have, in this room, you've probably received more than, like, you probably got something Friday and then again on maybe Sunday night for this, and you'll get more for Monday. But I also just want to name the fact that we've got members from the city, we've got people in the county, we've got different trustees from our 7 feeder districts. We've got students, staff, teachers at the very school that we're sitting in, and also some of our third-party organizations that are representing themselves as community members. And I think what I like hearing from this group is, yeah, we're going to have to make sure that we come within the terms of for the law, the voting rights, but Eastside and this community here can do that and be mindful of what we know about our population as it regards to income and how experiencing unhousedness, and that if we meet those requirements in terms of the voting law, that we have the time, the mentality, and kind of that sense of mission to make sure that we look at those second and third layers of analysis to make sure that we put together for the future a board that can be elected to serve all of our students. And I think, one of our speakers, hey, students first, right? And that's part of our mission, is to get to this process, knowing that it's set up by the power of the vote, that we set it up in a way that's going to ultimately be best for our community. So again, I want to thank you all for being here and taking the time and spread the word. And, I don't want to say everybody, you got homework to make a map, but if you're so inclined, make a map.
I would like to ask the superintendent that, have you publicized to ethnic media, like ethnic radio or television? Because I know that they really dominate. Most of people probably may listen on the radio more when they drive to go to work, or, pick up something, or they go to television. So maybe something we could reach out for the last 2 public hearing.
Yeah, so we reach out to our media partners in that. There's also, in doing this, we want to make sure that they're aware, but also know that certain groups have a larger media presence. And so want to make sure that whether it's through media or for some of our, communities of faith, that they be informed of it.
Right, thank you, Superintendent. Well, any other question that you have tonight before we end the meeting? No more question, no more question. Oh, one more question. Chuck, go ahead.
Actually, it won't take long. I just want you to understand that it is not just incumbent on the individual to bring together a constituency to represent them. It's incumbent on the people who serve them to do that. So you are on the hook to seek the engagement of the community that you serve. There are processes and professionals who do this work routinely. It is difficult for you to do it, and I understand that. But it is incumbent on you to ensure that the people that you represent are present. And that means sometimes you have to work harder. Thank you.
I accept that. And every time I've heard a comment like that, I've never heard someone actually take on the responsibility. I will do X, Y, and Z, or communicate with us about partnering. And I want to make that comment.
Okay, any more member has any comments? Right. Do you have any more comments?
I just want to thank everybody again for making it out. I think this is one of the biggest rooms that we've had. There's still room, right? There's still room. So there's clearly a lot of work for us to do. Agreed, 100%. And we're about it. But I don't want to let that be the reason why we don't thank each and every one of you for making the time to be here tonight where you could have been so many other places. So really appreciate your engagement, and please continue coming and please spread the word, and don't just wait for these meetings for us to have the conversation with the communities, with your friends, with other Eastsiders, and please draw up a lot of maps. Let's put this man to work. Is he still here? Right there. Oh, put this man to work. I mean, not that you're not working. We know you're working, Paul. But yes, we look forward to seeing many more maps. Thank you.
We'll
Yeah.
see you, we'll see you Monday at Independence with some of those new levels of analysis and data points that you can add, and that'll be great.
Yeah, thank you everyone being tonight. And I know that, really appreciate all your time. So press your word around the community, and we're looking forward to see you on Monday or July 15. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.